Hi, this is Braden Holtby.
Hi, this is Brian Burke.
This is Kelly Rudy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carly Agro from Sportsnet Central.
I am Jason Greger.
Hi, this is Scott Hartnell.
This is Quick Dick McDick.
Hey, it's Ron McLean, Hockey Night in Canada and Rogers Hometown Hockey, and welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Currently sitting in a hotel room with my parents' TV turned right down low. Got to give a shout out to, both my parents. They've come along for the journey, the SNP summer road trip. My father will not let me take the helm of the ship, so he's been driving the entire time. We're 1,500 K in. We've taken a 2-hour ferry ride across to the island, and it's been a fun little journey thus far. But you don't want to hear anything about that. We want to get on to today's guest, and before we do that, we better talk about our the people who've been helping make this trip possible. So first off, foremost, originally the idea for this trip happened sitting in their boardroom, so shout out to Lewis Stang. They offer smooth wall grain bins, hopper bottoms, and fuel tanks. They're in stock and manufactured locally. They want to ensure that they are constructed of the highest quality and engineered for a long life. Delivery is free within 300-kilometer radius of Lloydminster. You can buy at any of their co-op locations, Lloydminster, Lashburn, or Neilburg. For more information, you can check them out at their website, foremost.ca. Baker Hughes Upstream Chemicals. When you need improved performance or productivity, your solution often exists in the proper application of specialty chemicals. We offer multiple chemical lines to improve performance, use, and production. Not to mention, we have the best group of guys, yours truly included, around that will go above and beyond to ensure you get what you need and answers to all your questions. For all your oilfield chemical needs, look to Baker Hughes. And finally, Tracy Klotz, the CEO of Titus Tools, a locally owned business with which Tracy formed in 1997. A shout out to Tracy. He approached me about this. He has over 40 years of experience in the oil industry, having started as a roughneck on an oil well service rig, then working his way up to sales and marketing manager for a Calgary-based oil tool company. Titus Tools, under Tracy's direction, has remained loyal to the community, remaining invested in the many charities and charitable events that are hosted around Lloydminster. And if you're interested in finding out more about Titus Tools, head to TitusTools.com. Appreciate all the support from these companies to help make this trip possible. And let's get on to our T-Bar 1 tale of the tape. Originally from Viking, Alberta, he played for the Red Deer Rustlers of the AJHL, then the Lethbridge Broncos of the WHL. He was drafted in 1978 in the 11th round and the final pick, 179th overall by the Chicago Blackhawks. He played a year in Japan, a year for the AHL affiliates of the Chicago Blackhawks, the New Brunswick Hawks. He earned Rookie of the Year there. From 1979 to 87, he played for the Chicago Blackhawks. In his career, he had 161 goals, 118 assists, 279 points in 406 career games. He retired at the age of 29, and from then, he would go on to be a head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks, the San Jose Sharks, the Calgary Flames, and finally the LA Kings. He has 2 Stanley Cup titles to his name. I'm talking about Mr. Darryl Sutter. So buckle up, because here we go.
This is Darryl Sutter, and welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Darryl Sutter. So thank you, sir, for hopping on with me.
Thanks for being at the farms. Come to Alberta.
Oh, this has been exciting. You're the first stop on hopefully a good little road trip where things, fingers crossed, go the right way and we don't have any bad luck.
Yeah, awesome. Go travel through the mountains in August. British Columbia will be beautiful. Beautiful time of the year to go.
Yeah, well, and like you say, beautiful time of year. You don't have to worry about the snow or weather really impeding you. You can kind of travel at will.
Hopefully you don't go through none of that smoke or any of the fires.
Yeah, to the south.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like I say. We'll knock on some wood here and hope that we get some good luck.
My oldest brother Gary just moved back he moved to Sylvan Lake, Alberta he's lived in Kelowna for about 20 years, and he moved this summer. And so we've been on that shuffle a little bit, getting him back out here.
Yeah. Well, the reason I wanted to sit down with you is, as kids, we grew up and watched different things, or were taught different things, and a lot of it comes from lessons I believe you guys were learned as kids. So I kind of wanted to pick your brain on your childhood, and we'll see where it goes from there. But in reading about you and everything else, I always have to chuckle with the 7 boys in a single farmhouse. What was life like back then?
We lived a very simple life. We grew up right in the yard, Sean, that we're in now. And there was an old house in the old farmhouse that we lived in here. And it was a mixed farm. Dad had cows, range cows. We milked cows, pigs, chickens, the whole mixed farm thing growing up. And Dad and Mom were married young, and Mom started having babies when she was 18. So really, we were all, we were so close in age. There was the 7 boys in 10 years that they had. So the deal with Dad always was work hard, play hard. So everybody chipped in chores and everything, and then we could do what we wanted after, and played ball, played hockey, played football, everything here. When you have 7 guys that close in age, quite honest, all you had to do was find one more guy, and it was 4-on-4 always, whatever you're playing. So somebody'd come out on the school bus and stay overnight or whatever it was, and we had a neighbor boy right here that was the same age as my oldest brother, so you could always get 8. You could always play 4-on-4, whatever. And obviously, from our winters and our summers, that it wasn't just about hockey. There was ball, or really we played ball and football and hockey year round somehow.
I've always wondered about the barn loft hockey games, and being the 8th guy. Was the 8th guy somebody who came once and was like, "Oh man, I got to take a month or 2 off of that"? I had to.
There was guys that came and never came back. But there's still guys that talk. We still are best friends growing up. We're still all our best friends, and they still talk about coming out here. They still talk about coming out here and about the hayloft, and people still come out. They'll bring their kids and take them, show them the hayloft, and some of the stuff that went on. And the 2 ends, the big doors in the haylofts, we had them chicken wired off. That's where the nets were, and those the 8th guy never. He didn't get the short end of the stick. Our youngest brothers always did. The twins were usually the goalies and we'd just play shirts and skins up there, and it was hot. Like, so when it was, it was like a sauna in the hayloft all the time. We still have our sticks and everything still, and Mom kept everything's in a row up there. So the only time we had to quit was when the milk cows came in, because there was so much noise that you had to quit and come and milk cows. And then Dad still joked about it at the end before he died, that he said, keep the hayloft full this time, because he'd make us fill the hayloft full of square hay bales, and then about October, November, we'd throw all the hay bales out of the hayloft and start hockey. So.
Do you remember were you being one of the older ones? Do you remember the first time the bales got thrown out so you could play?
Oh yeah, and we'd keep enough up there just so Dad we wouldn't get in too much trouble. So basically, we'd make a wall or boards or something. But so there'd always be 200 or 300 bales for sure get chucked out, and we'd stack them nice along the side of the barn. He wouldn't say nothing, but that's what we did.
It's funny. I can just, as a parent, you come around the corner, you got everything up in the hayloft, it's all nice and neat, and then there's 300 bales out on the side. I assume your dad must have been like, the heck is that about?
I don't even know who ever came up with that idea that we were going to play in the hayloft, like play games up there, and it became like crazy. Like that. We always said that's why we were the skinniest guys in our teams always, because you'd sweat up there just you'd just be dripping up there. It'd be so hot in the summers. And even when we went away to play junior, we'd still play. We'd have games in the hayloft.
Was there any injuries that came out of the hayloft?
Once in a while we'd fall. There's trap doors in there, so we could throw feed down into the stalls for the cows. And once in a while somebody'd go through those plywood. We had to reinforce that plywood a few times.
Just part of the game.
Yeah. Boards, that's why we still talk about, that's why we were not very good in open ice. We were good along the boards always, because in the hayloft it was all boards.
Body checking allowed, obviously, then?
The shoes wide open, no rules. None of that stuff like now. The new NHL rules wouldn't have went very good up in that place.
What do you think of all the new NHL rules?
You know, we had to change it. We've evolved. I played and coached through all those rule changes and all those lockouts and all that, and in order to get different types of players, a smaller, faster player, and move some of the less gifted guys out. That's what's happened, and now you're used to it. It's definitely changed. I think that the influx of more Europeans, obviously, and now you're into about a 40% U.S. player. Most of them come through the high school, college route, so they're used to the bigger surfaces, different style of game. So the game had to make changes for that. I think that I wish we could still accommodate the fan a little more, because the rules tend to take away from the physical part of the game and the checking part of the game. So, and the fans at the end of the day want that. They want to see speed, but they want to see contact too, and we've lost some of that.
Do the Sutters all get drafted in today's era?
Oh, easy. Not a problem. Like Brent would still be a top player in the game today. Easy. I mean, we were, one thing about most of us, we could all score, and we were good around the net, and everybody's still looking for guys that can score and be good around the net. It's still you watch playoff games right now, and it's the first thing they talk when they lose. They go, "We got to get more guys in front of the goalie. We got to get around the net.
We got
to get tougher in the corners. We got to win more battles." Well, that's what we did. That's why most of us were captains, and we weren't afraid to get top players on your teammates, to challenge them to do that.
What was it? I have 3 older brothers, and I think we all dreamed of one day being in the NHL and playing against each other and whatever else. You got to experience going to war against your brother. Were those, did you look across the ice and see whoever sitting there, or was it just another guy in another jersey until the game was done?
No, it's a long story to talk about that, Sean. It's hard to explain to everybody that, like, we grew up, we practiced to play in the NHL. That's what we did as little boys, even on the kitchen floor or in the hayloft, or we played against each other hard all the time. We were somebody on somebody's team. I was Bobby Holt, Dwayne was Stan Mikita, Brian was Gordie Howe, Gary was Dave Keon, Brent was Bobby Orr. Like, it goes, that's how we played. And when we played, that's what it meant. And so when we played against each other in the NHL, we were going to do that. Like, that's what we did. And still, when my memories of playing, the first time I got called up to play in the NHL, play for Chicago, my brother was the captain of St. Louis. I got called up to play in the playoffs, and I had to play against him, our line against their line. And we were we had a big checking line in Chicago with Tom Lysak and Rich Preston and myself, and Brian played in the top line with Bernie Federico and usually Wayne Babbage. So our job was shut them down. So we played against each other and that was my first experience at the NHL level about playing, and the deal was to beat them. That's it. Didn't matter. Once the game was over and the series was over, especially in the playoffs, and you talk to your brother, but we didn't talk to each other on the ice or any of that stuff. It was game on, and like even Dad would tell us, like, if you watch the game now, guys are visiting and warm up and all that stuff. If Dad would have seen that and he was at a game, somebody would have caught it for that. Like, your deal was to. I remember my dad telling my twin brothers, "You guys don't go home with a bloody nose or a black eye." He said, "You didn't do your job." That's the way we played. My best memory about playing against my brothers for the first time was when I played the Twins, and so they were my youngest brothers, and they were both playing for Philly, and I was captain of Chicago, and they came in Chicago Stadium, and I'd left home when I was 16 to go play junior, and so then I hadn't seen my twin brothers play since they were little boys. Like, literally, probably on the farm was the last time I'd seen them play, and going out and standing there and looking in warm up, there's Ronnie and Richie with the Philadelphia Flyers was pretty cool, actually. And I remember watching them on the bench. Every once in a while, I go, "Darryl, smarten up, just friggin' concentrate on your own game." I'd be watching them, and that's one of my best memories. Brent I didn't even know this. He told me this summer that his first game that he played in the NHL was an exhibition game and was in Chicago Stadium against us. He was 18 years old, and he said that he couldn't believe he was playing against me in the NHL, because my favorite team growing up was Chicago, and I was playing for Chicago, and he said he remember being he was a kid seeing that, and he said he was amazed by that.
You know, it's probably hard to fathom anymore that you could have your twin brothers playing really good hockey and never see them again until the NHL. You know, we just think of all the technology we have now, Darryl. You can watch anybody anywhere, pretty much. You want to watch a novice game somewhere, you probably get it on.
You can. Like the arena in town, you can go there and watch your kids play when they're out of town now with that new, whatever it's called. Fast hockey or whatever.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool that they roll in Philadelphia Flyers jerseys of all things. And
I never seen them play bantam hockey, midget hockey, or junior hockey.
So did you give them a nice welcome to the NHL? Was there a couple of body checks?
Oh, I'm sure there was. We wouldn't have played against each other that much the way lines match up, because I'd have been on more of a veteran line, and twins played together, and so it would have been probably a different matchup. So you got to watch them from the bench lots.
What was the old Chicago arena like?
It's awesome building. You had to have courage to play there because it was only 187 feet, so you don't have much ice. Now, the rinks now are 200 feet. That was 187, so there's not much room on the ice. That and the Boston Gardens were the two intimidating places to play. They were both short rinks, and they had to have that type of player to play in that building, somebody that could take it. You were always in traffic, put it that way.
Heavy hockey?
Yep. She was, and this Chicago Stadium crowd was like no other. When you see you still see replays of the anthem. Now it's still the same. They've recaptured the anthem in the United Center the way it was in the stadium, and it's loud, and they're going for the whole 2.5 hours. Still, for me, it was still my favorite place to. Obviously, as playing there and coaching there, but then to go back in there too was fun too.
Going back to your childhood, I'd read that you had no running water, an outhouse, no electricity, no telephone for the early stages of your childhood.
Yep, till I was 8 years old.
8 years old. Do you remember getting electricity then?
Yeah.
Was that?
Remember getting when we moved here and we had the telephone. Mom said that we were out because that was in the old party line days. We were always listening in to all the neighbors, and she'd have to tell us to. She said when we first got the running water that we'd bath all day, us boys, because you had running water. You just get in the tub. Interesting. Now you're trying to explain that to your grandchildren. Like if one tap doesn't work, there's something going wrong, or if the light's not working, there's something wrong. But that's the way it was.
Well, you've seen a lot of different. In your lifetime, like there's been a lot of giant changes. You just think sitting out on the farm right now, and you can. I mean, I come from a different generation, but I remember getting or having TV 2 and 4, the couple of channels.
Yep.
Hockey Night in Canada was Hockey Night in Canada because you had nothing else on.
Yep. Saturday night CBC was a big deal, right? Hockey game at 6. And then Sunday night we'd tried, we could get games on CBC on the radio on Sunday afternoons always. You'd get an afternoon game. It'd be like Boston always played afternoon games. Montreal would play the odd Sunday games, but we'd listen to a game on Sunday afternoon on the radio.
So just pack around the radio and sit there and listen to it?
Yeah. I can remember listening to games in the afternoons and Sunday, and that was exciting. We were going to get to listen to Chicago and Montreal or something like that.
Chicago was your team?
Oh, yeah. I have scrapbooks that I kept when I was a kid and pictures that I drew and stuff of Blackhawk players.
Well, that's probably, you drew one of a Chicago guy and 2 New York Islander guys.
Yeah, I still have that. It's in Mom's house.
So that story is true.
Yeah.
For the people who don't have no clue what I'm talking about.
And I played with him, that guy. His name was John Marks.
That's who you drew it of?
Yeah.
Who are the 2 Islanders?
Dennis Potvin and Gary Howitt.
So those were just 3 of your favorite players?
No, that's when the Islanders were just sort of coming into their own.
Okay.
And it was a story on Sports Illustrated, and they had a full picture and those were the 3 guys, and so I painted that picture.
So he how old were you when you painted this?
Well, it's probably 11, 12.
So at 11, 12, he paints a picture of the Chicago Blackhawk and 2 Islanders, and then he ends up playing for the Blackhawks, and 2 of your brothers end up playing for the Islanders.
They played with both those guys, and they won the 4 cups.
Like, that's poetic.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. And the guys that were my heroes growing up were Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita, and Tony Esposito, and I got to play with both Stan and Tony, and then got to know Bobby from living in Chicago. So,
did they live up to expectation?
Yeah, they were heroes. They were still, they were stars, and rightfully so.
What was I got to grow up watching guys like Gretzky, Lemieux. I mean, I'm still watching now, but
Yeah.
in my heyday, it was Gretzky, Lemieux, Joe Sakic. Stevie Y is my all-time favorite growing up. But what separated those guys back in the day? What made them special?
Well, when you're kids growing up, the guys that you see on TV and look like, they're doing something special, those are the guys that stick in your mind, right? Unless they were a big fighter or the goal scorers and the flashy guys always stood out to you. And so our heroes were all guys that we'd picked out. They were stars. As I said, like Brian was Gordie Howe, and I was Bobby Hull, and Brent was Bobby Orr, and that's how we played. And that's the guys we tried to emulate. So you know what it's like when you're a kid. You went out and I always tried to have Bobby Hull slap shot, right? So you went outside, took 100 friggin' slap shots. Remember those? You picked that guy out if you liked Wayne Gretzky tucking his sweater, and guys tucked their sweaters in. That's the way you play.
How many sticks do 7 boys go through?
We had lots of nails in our sticks.
Nails. Nail them back together?
Yes. We used, those are the same sticks you used in town or the ones you used in the hayloft. So you had there's triple layers of tape and little finishing nails in there. And, sticks lasted you all winter. That's the way it was. Once in a while we'd get broke off sticks from the senior team in town. That's what we did. I still laugh when you see the number of sticks that the players use now. You'll go on a road trip and they'll take a dozen sticks with them. Even when I started playing the NHL, you had your game stick and you kept it as long as you could because that was your favorites. They all felt different then because of wood, and wait, you'd shave your sticks down, get them feeling just right, and the one that was the best you always saved for the game. And you keep it you had your practice sticks and you had your backup sticks. You see now even guys still emulate a little bit. You look on it when the TV shows the sticks, they'll have like number 2, number 3, or number 4. That's the order they want their stick, right? When they break them. And it still happens. That's sort of a good luck or a thing, right? Having your favorite stick or the way you put your skates on or your pull your socks on. So you remember if you didn't score for a while, then you switched it up a little bit or something like that.
You said shaved your sticks. You shaved the wood sticks down?
Yeah, the heels or the toes, they all didn't come, even though you had a pattern, they didn't come quite the same, and you could shave a little bit off your heel, get a little weight off it. Did lots of that. And guys started shaving their shaft or their grip on top just to get it, because they didn't come the same. Some were... Then the sticks were made out of straight ash. They weren't composited or compressed wood. They were straight ash, so they were basically cut out of one single tree that was, and then they fit the blade into that single shaft. So you had to do a lot of shaving, and was about the time when I turned pro that they started using torches to curve, and actually that's where it started, was in Chicago with Stan and Bobby, the curved stick. They'd put them in the hot water and then pull them under the door and lift them to curve them and leave them there, right?
Nobody'd seen that before.
Yeah. That's the big curves. You look at pictures of them guys, they had curves that were... The big thing was there was a time when you could put a quarter under a curve. You set your blade on and put a quarter under. That meant you had an inch. 1 inch curve, and the coaches would get mad at you because then they'd say you don't have a backhand or you couldn't puck and roll off your stick. But we'd still cheat and try and do it. And then it became a dime. That's how they measured it legally. When they started using a skate lace from heel to toe, and then slide a dime under there. And if the dime went through without touching that lace, that was an illegal stick. That's how they first started measuring illegal sticks.
Was Darryl Sutter an illegal stick user?
No. I had a little bit of a curve, but I didn't like it. I didn't like it on the boards, having the way my blade was.
Trying to pick a puck up off the
Yeah,
boards.
I never got the good feel for a big curve. I liked being able to kind of do both.
You mentioned the way you put your socks on, good luck charms, that kind of thing. Did you have a routine then before games?
Left to right all the time.
Left to right. Well, do you remember how you came up with that, or was that just?
No, I don't know. It was just always left to right. Go up the left side and then up the right side.
You talk about your sticks and shaving them and having one stick and finishing nails and stuff like that. You remember the thought that went through your brain when you were like, I can have more than X amount of sticks?
Yeah, and when I think about that, it was because my brother Brian played in St. Louis, and the Blackhawks in St. Louis were on a different, in terms of, we had wealthy owners, and they were always going through owners or in receivership or something, and they were always short of stuff. And I'd always tell our trainers, because Brian and I were both left shots, and we used we had the same patterns, everything. And I'd always tell the trainers, get one of my sticks, take an extra one, so I could give it to Brian in St. Louis, because they were always short of stuff. So even in the NHL, like if we went to play one game, I'd always have 3 sticks. But if we go to St. Louis, I'd put 4 in and see if they could sneak one over so Brian could have another stick.
Isn't that crazy to think of?
Yeah. Even skates then, we were CCM skates back then, the old tacks. Remember the old tacks? Well, there was a time when they were made out of kangaroo.
Kangaroo?
Yeah. Everybody thinks it was cowhide, but it was kangaroo. And so if you were on the kind of the top end of the CCM structure, they'd make sure you got your 7.5 skates, kangaroo skates, the width you wanted, whether it was DC, whatever. They had all these different measurements for your toes and all that. And there was a lot of guys that only would wear kangaroos, and Brian and I were 2 of them. And when they outlawed the kangaroos. It was something to do with importing kangaroo skin. We still had boxes of, the factory still had boxes of skates where it would say Darryl Sutter, Brian Sutter, like that, like the guys and so we got them all. But then when Brian would wear his skates out, they're the same as mine, or I wore mine out. We made sure we could get each other's skates still. So it was pretty cool.
Whoever thought the outlawing of kangaroo would affect the Sutters?
Yeah, that's a true story. They were nice because you didn't even have to break them in. They were like wearing hush puppies. Worst part is when you got hit in those old skates, and you get hit in the toe or the feet. It was just like having a pair of socks on, because it would hurt.
Who had the hardest shot back then? Who was the guy you're like, I don't want to step in front of that? Or was there a guy or two like that?
Yep. Probably when I was starting, there was a player named Reed Larson. Played Detroit and Minnesota, and he was a big right-handed defenseman. Had a great shot. Guy Lafleur was, and I know
Lafleur had a cannon.
Oh yeah, he had a wicked shot, and I know because he was a right winger and I was a left winger, and I had to check him lots. So.
Who was back then? Who was the toughest guy to check? Who was the toughest guy to make sure stayed off the score sheet?
He was probably, being a right winger, and in those days, you checked your position. So if I played left wing, he was right wing, that was your guy.
Right.
And you'd turn him over to the defenseman once in a while, and then you had the right D, was your coverage. So that was the whole ice, not like now where they just do it in zone or they have trap in the neutral or whatever. It was, you did that you did it 200 feet. And that was your coverage. That's why when you hear those stories about, somebody checked Gordie Howe, well, that meant they just followed him around the ice. When they had the puck, he stayed with him. If he was right, it didn't matter where he went, he stayed with him. That was
man to man.
It was basically, that's how the NHL played then. If you couldn't play that way, then you couldn't play in the NHL. That's why the clutching, grabbing, and stuff like that was in vogue, because that's how you had to play, because most guys were either bigger or faster or something than you, so you had to make it even, and the stick made it even.
You'd mentioned you left home at 16.
Yep.
To go play in Red Deer.
Yep.
Looking back then, do you remember, I think for any hockey player, probably any athlete, any person who leaves home, everybody has mixed feelings about moving out from underneath the parents' wings, so to speak. What was it like moving to Red Deer for you?
Well, Brian had been there, and then obviously you go into billet families, and Brian had lived at we all went through those same families, us boys, as we went, so that made it easier. But
you all stayed at the same billet house?
Yeah.
Who were the billet parents?
In Red Deer was a family called the Tyke family, and in Lethbridge was the Ross family. And we became really, they became like grandparents to our grandchildren. In fact, the Marg Ross in the family we lived with in Lethbridge, she has her 90th birthday this week. So we're all still pretty connected to that. But that was probably made it a little bit easier for us. But I think in those days when you went, so Red Deer then was, we would be leaving this weekend. So the long weekend in September, you'd go to training camp. And if you made the team, then you started school and you stayed there. And then you didn't come home till Christmas. And it's not like nowadays where you can just drive to Red Deer, no problem, 2.5 hours, and you had cell phones and all that. We didn't have cars. We obviously didn't have cell phones. So we'd phone home Sunday nights to the farm. We'd phone collect, because Sunday night after 6, it was free. You could call. And back in those days. So that's when we were allowed to call home and talk to mom and dad and your brothers. So that, and they very seldom could come to games the way it worked. So you didn't really, you left in September and you came home for a week in December, and you went back and you came home when school was over.
bring back fond memories. I mean, I'm definitely a lot younger, but when I went out to Ontario, I had to call. I got a phone card, and that's how we called home.
Yeah.
And well, I mean,
That's what you could afford, and that's what your parents could afford.
That's right.
And that was a big difference now, because you can FaceTime. You can do whatever you want.
No, you can be on the other side of the world and FaceTime right now, and
Yep.
it's like you haven't even left.
Yep.
This doing this podcast has been that I've been able to with everything that happened with COVID. We stopped doing face to face for a long time, and I've Zoomed meeting a guy who was sitting over in Indonesia, a girl in Italy. Right? It's just the world is small now with technology.
Yep.
And back then, kids, you and I have a hard time remembering a time when you couldn't just drive to Red Deer to go watch.
Yeah. And mom and dad didn't get to go to a lot of games either, because they were milking cows and chores, and they had one truck and an old car, and that's the way it worked. We were going to pursue what we wanted to do, and they backed us and were behind us, and that's the way it worked. Heck, when I went to Red Deer, even if we would have had a vehicle, you couldn't afford to drive home anyways, because they paid you. They got $7 if you won a game, $5 if you tied, and $3 if you lost. So basically what you did was the team paid for your room and board, and then it was $300 a month the families would get, and we'd get obviously school, and then win, tie, loss, 7-5-3.
How many games you play in a year?
Probably 70
So was $7 a game decent?
if you won.
Like, was that good money?
Oh, I thought that was freaking plenty. That's who knows? That's what the rules were, and I don't know what you were getting as a. We were 16 getting that. I don't know if the 18s and 19-year-olds were getting a little more. I think when I played in Lethbridge, I think we were getting they didn't pay you by the wins and losses, they paid you by the month. And obviously your room and board was paid, and I think I got $300.
What did you think of the jump to the WHL?
Again, it was transition. Brian had been there. I was gonna go to college, play Alberta Junior, and then go to college, and so I only played 1 year Major Junior, where my brothers all played. Twins and Brent Twins went as 15-year-olds to Red Deer, and then they played. Some of them played 4 years Major Junior, so I only really played the 1 year. But for me, it was.
What were you going to take in college?
Play hockey. I'm not really sure what I was going to take in school. I had several places. I was a good student, so I could have went to several. I could have went to Princeton, Harvard, all the big Division ones, Denver, Michigan Tech.
Did you go see any of these schools, or was it just?
And then
did you?
And then now I think they have a restriction. You can only visit 3, I believe, and there's only certain times of the year. But then it was wide open. They'd take you in.
So did you fly down and go for a huge road trip, or?
Yeah, they'd take you on a weekend. They'd work around your schedule, and they'd take you in. And I did some in the summer though too.
Which one stuck out to you, or which?
I'd signed a letter of intent at Michigan Tech, and I think it stuck out because I'd went in the winter, and they were playing games there, and they were playing North Dakota at the time. I remember it vividly when I was there, and they played a Friday, Saturday night, and I just thought the crowd was awesome, and it was hockey. It was hockey. It was a hockey school, and that's probably what drew me there the most. All my brothers could have went to back then. There was, especially when you went to play for the Red Deer Rustlers, they were a well-known program, and there was a lot of recruiting from NCAA colleges, and We all could have went some places, but Mom really wanted me to go to college. I remember that. She wanted one of her kids to go to school, and she was disappointed when I signed that letter of intent to go. And then at the end, I followed Brian to Lethbridge. That's a long time ago. But then you always look back and wonder if I wouldn't have made the NHL, because my brothers were all, Brian was the only one that was a second round pick. All my, the other four were all high first round picks. So if I wouldn't have made it, I was the only one that ever played in the minors of my brothers, until I guess Ronnie played a little bit later in his career and Richie a little bit later. But they all stepped right in. They went right from major junior to the NHL.
Do you remember your draft year? Because you...
Yep, remember it good.
Did you go to the NHL draft?
No, then I don't know if anybody went to the draft, Sean. I had a job that summer, and actually the day of the draft, I was troweling cement for a farmer, and the farmer's wife came out of the house and said, "Darryl, you have a phone call," because then it was just landlines. So they must have called Mom and Dad's here, and then Mom transferred them to the Erickson's farm, and she said, "Bobby Orr's on the phone." I said, "Yeah, right, Alan, just leave me alone. It's like 90 above over here." But anyway, so it was Bobby Orr, and then Bobby Orr was he'd got traded from Boston to Chicago at the end of his career, and they must have had him phoning the draft guys they drafted that day. So, anyways, that's my memory of being drafted. Was Bobby.
So did you go pick up the phone?
Yeah, I talked to Bobby. It was pretty cool. Charles Smith and Bobby Orr calls. So, but that's my memory of draft day, and then.
So did you go have a few sarsaparillas to at least celebrate?
I can't remember. I imagine we had to finish Charles Smith. That's my memory of draft. Other than that, I don't remember nothing about it.
Being drafted by your boyhood team, though, must have been super cool.
Yep.
You know, you have you don't take the typical route to getting to the NHL, because you get drafted, but then you go to Japan. What was in the choice to go to Japan, and how, like, of all the avenues, why Japan?
Then, at that time, if you were in very few guys, other than 20 guys in the NHL team and 20 guys in their farm team, had contracts. Everybody else was invited to training camp. And because I was such a late round pick, I got a letter from the Chicago Blackhawks inviting me to training camp, and without a contract offer. So I had nobody's input, or then you didn't have an agent or anything like that. No, I just said, I'm not going. And so I had to find somewhere else to go. And our owners in Lethbridge were Japanese, and they had contacts in Japan, and they'd sent two guys the year before, actually, Willie Desjardins and another player from Lethbridge named Doug Johnson. They'd both went to Japan, and they paid. I still remember they gave me $10,000 cash, which was a lot of money. It was more than I could have made playing in the minors at that time, and then they give you your free living, like a free apartment. So away I went, and I went till February. And when I came back in February, the scout from Chicago that had drafted me knew when I was coming home, and he called the farm here and asked if I wanted to go on a tryout to Flint, Michigan, which was like Chicago's third team. At that time, they had it was Chicago Blackhawks, the Dallas Blackhawks, and the Flint Generals were their teams. And he asked if I wanted to go to Flint on a tryout, and I remember I was sitting in the grain elevator in Viking that day, and BS one of my friends who was the elevator agent, and so I said, "What do you think, Cammy? Should I go?" Or He goes, yeah, go to Flint, play some games. Why not? So they flew me to Flint, and little did I know when I got there, they were in the playoffs, and they were down. It was a 3 out of 5 series. They were down 2-0. So I played one game. They lost, so they're out. And then they asked me, instead of going there, if I wanted to go to. By then they'd moved their farm team to Moncton.
In New Brunswick.
Yeah, the American League team. And they asked if I wanted to go to Moncton for a tryout, and I said, well, I'm halfway there now. So I went to Moncton, and the coach there was a man named Eddie Johnson. He was a goalie. Him and Cheevers were the goalies when Boston won the Cups always. And Eddie and my brother Brian had played together in St. Louis, so Eddie took care of me, basically. He was the coach. And at the end of the year, and I had a good run there, and he played me lots, and he was the man actually who got me the contract, Chicago Blackhawks. And next year he became coach of the Blackhawks. So I played that part of the end of the year, like February to May, in Moncton, and then he got me a contract that summer, again before agents and all that. So I signed a contract in a motel at the airport in Nisku, and I played that whole year after signing in the American League. Played 1 year there, and then I played in Chicago.
I got to take you back to Japan, because you fly over to Japan. What was playing? And I'm going to torture this. Was it Iwakura? Is that where you played?
Yeah, that was actually the name of that team. Was owned by it was a milk company, like a dairy, they milk and cream and bottled. Yeah.
What was play? I'm fascinated. Japan or hockey around the world in different places. Was the buildings full? Was it crazy fans? Was it fun? Was it just a surreal experience?
They only played in two cities. They played in the Olympic Stadium that was in Sapporo, which was built for the Olympics in '73. So it was a
state-of-the-art facility.
National Stadium, and the National Stadium in Tokyo. So there was it'd be like playing in buildings in Edmonton and Calgary, even though that's not where there was only like 2 teams in those cities. The other team, I was about 80 miles in a little town from Sapporo. So you practiced all week, and it's the same as when you played in Europe. You did your games in, I can't remember if there were every 2 weeks, all the teams would go to one place, and you'd play everybody. Then you'd go home and train for 2 weeks, and you'd go to Tokyo, and play there. That's how it worked. It's very similar to the way the leagues are run in Europe now. And then there was an import rule when I was there. There was a handful of Canadians and a handful of Russians playing there.
Just a different. You enjoyed your time in Japan?
I was young. I just turned 20 when I went. I think I left on my 20th birthday. So everybody always asks that question, Sean, and I think I did. I mean, we were a bunch of young guys, and I got to know the culture, and then for the first, I had to learn to speak it, because otherwise you were alienated. I still tell people this, that year I lived there in the city. I lived in a city called Tamakamai, but I was there 6 months, and I found 2 people that spoke English in 6 months, and they were missionaries from New Zealand. So, you know what? You either grow up or go home, one of the two. So I probably had lots of growing up to do, and did it, and I stayed.
Did you learn some Japanese then?
Yeah, I still recognize, I can still pick up what they're talking about. Like the main, if I hear somebody talking at another table, I know and I know it's Japanese, I can pick up what they're talking about still. And I'll say something to somebody in Japanese, and they'll look at you and go, oh. I still remember it. I think it's no different than learning something when you're young. It sticks with you.
What's maybe when you went over there, I'm sure as a young guy you have ideas or been told stories or XYZ. What was one of the things when you got there, whether it's Japanese culture or the people in general? Was there anything that stuck out to you? Like, geez,
Yeah,
didn't see that coming.
No, just it still sticks in my mind. Just the respect they had for their elders and for each other, even in the teams, the team standpoint, from the young players to the old players, the respect that was there, the respect from the players, the coaches, the families were so respectful of each other in terms of the kids and the mom and the dad and the grandparents. It was fascinating sometimes to watch and learn, and then their respect for their religion, whether they were Christians or Buddhists or whatever, those were the two there, but the respect they had for their church or was like it was part of their culture. It was fun learning once I adapted to, probably the first month it was just hockey, just hockey. That's what you wanted to do. You just wanted to play hockey, but then you had you wanted to see more and learn more. And I lived right in a port city, so I got to learn the flags that were coming in, the big ships, because then there might be like an American flag or a Philippine. I got to know them because they'd speak English, and I figured out how to get on the boats and get in their libraries and get books and newspapers and things like that. And that's what you did.
So you get on the boat to get a new book.
You could meet the sailors, and they'd get you on the ship, and you'd get in the libraries, and they had, because most of those guys they'd be 6 months out and so they needed stuff to do too, right? So they'd get like their 3-4 day furlough, and where they dock, and then so that's how you meet them. You go and find out where the places they'd hang out and stuff like that, and then.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you learn that by yourself, or was there a guy that
No,
somebody who passed that along?
no, I was on my own.
I always think it's interesting when you're in a culture where you can't converse with them, right?
Yeah.
You're in Finland, they could understand me, but they couldn't really converse back. And
Those
you have to.
those young guys in the team, those Sean, they wanted to learn English. There was guys my age,
Okay.
and they never got to play much. They were the kids on the team, so they wouldn't even dress all the time. They'd sit on the bench the whole game, not get one shift. You could dress like 30 guys, but so you spent a lot, and they all lived together. Team lived together. They didn't live with their families or nothing. The team lived in a great big boarding house, and they had their own practice facility. It was like very, very tight, and they were very careful what they could do and what they couldn't do. So, there was always 2 or 3 hours every day where they wanted to learn English, you want to learn Japanese, so you'd just sit around a table just like this, and you'd start, and it'd be like us taking French when we were kids. They'd taken English in school a little bit, so they could say hello, how are you, like that, and then you'd get talking and show, and then that's how you'd start, and pretty soon away you'd go.
So they had you live with the entire team?
No, I didn't have to, but the whole team lived. The players all lived together. They'd get to go see their families like once a month, and the married guys would get to go and see their wives once a month. Or the young guys would go and see their mom wherever they're from, because they were from all over Japan. It wasn't just like it was a club team. And the deal those guys had was they worked year round. When there wasn't hockey, they worked for the club, so they had to go out and work in the dairy or whatever it was, right? That was theirs. Like, we had 2 teams in our city. One was named after the milk company, and one was named after the paper and pulp company. And we'd see each other lots, but that's what they did. That's what we did. And their big players were Russian guys, and so you'd see them lots in the city, right? It was kind of.
Did you have to work at all for the company?
No.
No.
I just had to perform. They'd give you, even though it was December 1st, they sent $10,000 back to the Treasury branch in Viking. That was my salary for the year. But then, based on performance, they had envelopes, and if you had a good tournament or whatever, I didn't know this happened. The guy in the shirt and tie, an old guy, would come along. He'd have an envelope and he'd give it to me. I didn't know what it was. Right, it was stuffed with money, and that's
Your bonus.
Yeah, for playing good. So if you'd played good wherever you work, every couple of weeks, and they'd come in, they'd just give you this envelope. Not saying I'll just give you that envelope. Crazy. And then there's some great stories about that because yen, there was a $10,000 bill. It was 10,000 yen. And the first time I got one of these envelopes, it had like 200,000 yen. I was like, holy. It's like, freaking go out and buy a condo or something, right? I still remember 20 years old and 10,000, and when I figured it out, it was $60. That was US dollars what it was worth, 10,000 yen. So I'd saved my 10,000 yens, but that lasted. My bonus money, I never touched the salary. That stayed in the bank, and when we got married, we used that 10,000 yen to buy our first old farmyard, which is where your sister lives.
Really?
Yeah.
I did have to chuckle today. This morning I was up early having a coffee and whatever, and I watched an old Sutter documentary, one they did back when I was a kid. It was a while back, and you're being filmed in the house I was sitting in. And I was like, yeah, this is kind of surreal.
Yeah. That house we picked away, that's when I was playing in Chicago, and we did it we could afford to do it over 3 years. So we dug the hole in the basement one year. And then the next summer we came home and had the guy cut logs for us, and we set the logs up. And then the next year we came home, put the roof on. And the next year we came home, moved in.
Must have been a proud moment when you finally got in there.
Yeah. Well, we needed a house.
What were you doing before that then, when you'd come home?
There was an old farmhouse in that yard. Yeah, right by where the pump house is there. That's where the house was. We lived in it. Guys would laugh at me from Chicago because they go, "Where do you live?" I go, because I'd say, "Well, we don't have a phone. We don't have a TV." I go, "What do you do?" Yeah.
When you were training, what was training like in the summertime for you?
We'd run later on in the summer. We'd run the fence lines. But most of it was farm work.
So instead of having a track, you'd run the fence line.
Huh.
You and the brothers?
Yeah, it depends. My wife would run with me later when we were married. But when we were younger, us brothers, we'd run in work boots out in the fields.
Running work boots?
It's good for you. worked for us.
Well, you think a big old work boot by the time you got something off, or
We used to measure our strengthening by how far we could throw a hay bale or how high you could lift something, or that's what we did. And we never had a problem when we went to training camp. The only problem we had later on as our careers went on, by then, guys were going to the gym and like Brent, my brother, built his own room. That's what guys were doing. But the only problem we had later in our careers, because usually we were rehabbing injuries when we came home, and that was the hardest part, was rehab.
You've had some pretty horrendous injuries in your time.
Yeah, I had enough of them. That's probably the thing I regret most of my career was, well, not probably, it is the thing that I couldn't have played longer, and that if you had today's technology, I could have played longer and I would have got the proper therapy and rehab. Then you just tried to get back sooner, or play through it and all that, and it made matters worse for sure. That's probably why I got into coaching. I was lucky to never traded, play my whole career in one place, and then basically the Wirtz family took care of me. They offered me to stay there and coach, and then I was assistant coach the first year after I was done playing, and I really didn't like it. And they said, "Well, go coach the farm team then." And so I went and did that for 2 years. We went to Saginaw, Michigan, and Indianapolis, and then we went back to Chicago.
You didn't like being an assistant coach?
You know, I'm not sure that I didn't like being an assistant coach. I didn't like not playing. I didn't like standing behind the bench as a 29-year-old, and your friends were playing and I wasn't. So it was probably one of those.
It was tough.
It was probably one of those frustrating things more than anything. And I was lucky that guys my coaches that I was with were when I was hurt my last year as a player, my coaches were Roger Nielsen and Bob Pulford, who were two very respected top guys, and so I was lucky to work with them for the year, and that probably impacted me as much as anything, because I didn't have anybody who says, well, I want to be a coach, you're going to be a coach, they're full of it. They're not telling the truth. It's something that's got to be a natural thing, and something you love, and you got to give up a lot to do it, and I wasn't committed to ever staying and being a coach. I did it because I had a young family and we didn't make any money as a player, and I needed a job.
And you ended up being a pretty dang good coach.
Well, I was lucky. I did it for a long time, and I worked for great owners. It's the biggest thing about being a top head coach now is working for good ownership groups that understand what it takes to be successful. They might not did it at the sport level, but the reason that the best owners in the NHL are winners is because they've been very successful in what they do, and they understand it.
So over your career, yeah, I mean, you win 2 cups with the coaching side of it, but in a heartbeat, you would have taken playing over coaching any day of the week?
Best job by far is playing.
Is playing.
Toughest job as head coach.
I've heard you, or I think I read that you said coaching is the worst position in the organization.
Head coaching.
Head coaching.
Yeah. The staffs are so big now that there's, you got 6 or 7 guys in your coaching staff for the most part now. But the head coach now is, it's a really tough job. And you got to have a really good staff, and you have to have total trust from your management team and from your ownership team, because you got to stay tight and you got to stay close. And I know that. I went to finals 4 times with 3 different teams, so you learn just as much by losing in the finals as you do by winning in the finals. And it was one of the reasons we went to Los Angeles. We lost in Game 7 in Calgary, and I'd lost in 4 in Chicago to Pittsburgh. So it's sort of, when you lose in the finals, you want to get back to the finals, and you've learned just as much. So that's the way it works. And I was very fortunate. Most people, as players or coaches, never get that opportunity, or they never understand it, or never figure it out. And the sacrifice and the commitment that's made, and what you have to do in order to win championships.
What did you learn then going through Chicago and Calgary?
Well, Chicago was obviously different because we basically grew up there as a family and as a player, and you go from single, married, parent, captain, salary change. You grow up a lot through your career, and then to get to coach and stay there. We basically lived there for 16 years, and we would have still been there. When we made a family decision to come home when Chris was born, that was Chicago was our team. We were going to stay there and forever, right? And there would probably always be some sort of a job there for me. So, but when Chris was born, we just decided we'd bring Chris home, and then we stayed home for 2 years. And so it wasn't just what I learned from Chicago. That was different. That was a life thing. Calgary, in between Calgary, we'd went to San Jose. We'd stayed home 2 years, and I went to San Jose, and I worked at building a team there with with the owner and the management. We had a good hockey club, and we were there 6 years. And then coming to Calgary, my family stayed in San Jose because the kids were in school, so I lived by myself in Calgary for that year, the first year. And that's nuts. I tell people that now. Don't go without your family. Don't do that.
That was tough.
Well, it's just for somebody like me, you just go to the rink and stay at the rink, and you can wear yourself out doing that. You have to learn to branch out and find different things to do. But going to Calgary for us was awesome because it was basically coming back to Alberta once Chris was done school or our daughter was done school in San Jose, and Brett went away to play junior then. Coming back to Alberta was unbelievable, and to be able to build and put together a good team that had went from being a rough place for a few years to being one of the top teams was pretty cool. And we always say if we had to live in a city in Canada again, there would be no question we'd live in Calgary.
Diehard Oiler fan here, but that team with Iginla and that group of characters, that was a fun team to watch.
They were a character team. It was one of the things we talked about when I went there, because our owners were us. They were Alberta, Saskatchewan, proud guys. Doc Seaman, Harley Hotchkiss were awesome men, and Bud McKeag they were awesome owners, and they just wanted to put a respectable team on the ice, and they were on the edge of losing the franchise, selling the franchise, and it's one of the things we talked about when they first talked to me. I said, we have to get more West. We have to start putting the fans, give them something to cheer about again, and without being able to do it through free agency. They were a small market team. Without being able to do it that way by attracting stars or trading for stars, you couldn't do it. So our first thing was, we're gonna get Western Canadians. First off, we're gonna create a culture here with people, and that's what we did, and it took off from there. And they've thrived on that philosophy. They're great owners to work for. That's I always said. Doc Seaman and Harley Hotchkiss were unbelievable men, and they did a lot, not just for hockey in Calgary, they did it for hockey in Canada. They were the backers of Hockey Canada and building these small town rinks all over, and they were awesome people. It's my biggest regret when we lost in Tampa Bay. I wanted to win a cup for them guys. They were in their 80s. I wanted them to win they'd won the one in the 80s, and I wanted them to win another one. And I never feeling so bad losing Game 7. I felt for them more than anybody else.
What did you learn from? You mentioned every trip to the finals taught you something new. What did losing Game 7 with the Flames teach you?
Well, it was 2-1. Tells you how close it was. It was the lowest scoring game in the history of Stanley Cup. The series was. I think we outscored Tampa Bay. It's like 12-10 in 7 games, and they won it. And just tells you how. And as we talked about earlier, you're running out of ammo as you go along because we were playing long series, and we were the plumbers and the pluggers, and other than Jerome and Kipper, it was not a star power team. It was just based on everybody sucking it up every day and playing through injury. And we basically, when you did it on paper, we shouldn't have. Calgary shouldn't
have been the final.
Yeah.
No.
So we knocked that year. What did we learn by losing Game 7? We knocked off everybody that Vancouver took us lightly in the first round. They were the number 1 team in the league, and they had 7 or 8 stars, and they shouldn't have taken us lightly. And then we played, I forget the order, San Jose or Detroit. And Detroit was that star-studded older team, all the stars, and we knew we had to. Then the rules could work for it. You could chuck guys to death, make them not want to play 7 games. They didn't. They only wanted to play 5 or 6. That's the way it works.
That's what I love about hockey in the playoffs. You see the media guys or the panels discuss the first round, and these guys got no chance. And I always laugh. I'm like, all you got to do is get into the dance. Once you're in there, man, that first round.
Even more so now, Sean, just because the way everything is set up with the way the regular season is, with the way how many games you play. There should be more division games, and they just haven't been able to. They haven't been able to do that. And then with the wild cards the way there now, you get in, it's wide open. I mean, even look this year with the way it's. It'll never be like this again, hopefully. But you look at teams that pop in and make upset somebody. Look at a team like Montreal or Chicago. Montreal, these teams. The original 6 teams that got in, Montreal, Chicago, Rangers, wouldn't have been playoff teams.
Yeah.
And they got into the play-in and knocked somebody out, right? So it's very, very close. Salary cap has controlled a lot of it now, and you look at the teams that are going to lose top players this year because the salary cap, they're not going to be able to keep them. And so these guys are going to move around and be hired guns, and it just tells you the importance of the younger guys coming in and because they're on entry-level deals and fitting in. And you look at the kids that are playing now and how good they are, but there was a time when they would have done their 2 or 3 years in the American League for sure. It's just the way it works.
You mentioned hopefully it goes back to, I assume you're 16 teams in the playoffs. Do you not like the play-ins then?
I think 16 that's over half your league, or it's going to be half your league. That's enough to get in. I mean, baseball's going to that now too. But when you look at how your divisions are split up, that's the tough part, right? The East-West part of it, because you can say that whichever side you're on, you can say there's 10 teams in the East that are better than 6 teams in the West, or whichever way you want, but you can't all get in. So, and then the way the games played are, when you look at our division out here with Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, 3 California teams in Arizona, Vegas. Well, you only play them 4. You play one team, I believe, 5 times. The other one's 4. Well, it's not enough. In the old days, when you played in your division, you played them 8 to 10 times. And that's how you found out who's going to make the playoffs. The play-in was the regular season.
Did you like playing somebody 8 to 10 times?
Well, that's part of the deal. I mean, you get 17,000 people in a building wanting to kill Minnesota North Stars or the St. Louis Blues. That's the fun part. You go into places now where there's 8,000 people at a game, and you go, "Is there a game tonight?" And that's happening. So,
You think part of the, I bring it back to the Oilers. If the Oilers played the Flames 10 times a year, that'd be good for Alberta.
yep.
You'd
Players aren't crazy about it, but you build rivalries that way. Everybody goes, well, it's a rivalry. Edmonton and Calgary. It's only a rivalry if you play each other lots and beat the hell out of each other. If one team is always better than the other one,
Yeah, it's nothing.
yeah, it's not a rivalry. That's where it's built. It's not just a playoff rivalry. It starts, and the guys talk about it, and the teams sell that too, which they have to. It's the best part. The rivalry is still the best part because it's hard to play. It's hard for the players to play a game every other day and travel. It's hard, and they need different things to spur them on or to motivate them.
Back in the day, who was the rivalry team you guys had? Who was Chicago's team that you played?
Probably St. Louis, because it was a 300-mile. It'd be like Edmonton, Calgary.
Yeah. So
and
go and
and
play.
there was good, and they were good. St. Louis had good teams, and then that North Division also the Leafs were in it. So the Leafs, even though they weren't a very good team then, it was a rivalry just because it was 2 original 6 teams in a division, And so there was a long-standing rivalry, ownership rivalry, management rivalry. Like there was and it went way deeper than the player. So that was a rivalry.
When you say way deeper than the player, what do you mean?
Well, just that the fans don't like each other, and and the old owners, they've went through, those two teams that went through original six. I mean, so you think about it, there's only 120 players, and most of them are Canadians that get to play on those six teams. So there's a fight over players every summer, and like there's lots more to it than just the players looking like it was once in a while there was a brawl or something. There was a lot more to it than that. There was a lot on the line. It's different. Now you have 30s. We'll have 31 or 32 teams once with Seattle, and it's hard. It's hard to get to know all the players as a fan. Or heck, we do our pools, and a lot of the guys that come and we do the pool with, they don't know the players, which you used to know them all. So you have to have different ways of doing pools now too.
Yeah, well, 32 teams is a lot.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna go to 750 players, which everybody says it dilutes the talent pool, but we're taking now from all over the world. There was a time when there was a handful of Swedish players in the league. There was a handful of Russians. There was fewer Americans than there was Swedish players. It's changed a lot.
When you were on road trips, did you have a seatmate or a roommate, or did you guys?
I had the same roommate as a player for 6 years.
And who was that?
It was Tommy Lysiak, and Tommy was from High Prairie, Alberta.
Okay.
He was a really good player. He was played junior in Medicine Hat. Him and Lanny McDonald were the same draft year. They were teammates in junior, and then both were really good NHL players. He was my centerman. He's probably why I got to play in the league so young, because he was such a good player. And he wanted me to play with him. So it's probably a big reason why I got to play on a good line for a long time. He in today's game, he'd be a Hall of Famer. He should be one. And today's game, he'd be a top player. He's a player like he's just a top all-around guy. He'd be like Bergeron or something like that. That's the kind of player he was. He's one of the last guys not to wear a helmet too. He'd always tell guys if they touched me, he'd take a stick, hit over their head. I knew I was safe. He'd tell guys in warm up, "Don't touch me. You'll get this right over your head." It's a good deal for me.
Did you play without a helmet then?
No, I could have. I was the last age that year. That draft was the last. We just had to sign a waiver, and then there was guys my age that didn't, like LC Cord. Was one of the last ones. There was only a handful. So if we didn't want to wear a helmet, I just had to sign a waiver not to wear one. After that year, everybody had to wear one.
How about goaltenders? Did you grow up playing where goalies weren't wearing helmets?
Nope.
So goalies always.
Oh no, there was masks. No,
or masks, sorry.
Yeah, no. Everybody had a mask by the time Yep. But then they were just wearing the old jock plant with the straps in the back. That was one of the things you wanted to do, and if the goalie ever got into, if there was a line brawl or anything, you always wanted to grab the goalie's mask and give him the snap. Give him one of those. You'd reach in the file. Like we were in Vancouver one night. Tiger Williams was playing for Vancouver, and we were in a big schmozzle down on the ice. And Tiger, being Tiger, he'd reach into Tony and grab his mask and give him the old snap. Everybody thought it was pretty funny, actually. Yeah. It was different. Then I can remember you talk about that stuff with equipment, and then there was guys who wore hair pieces under their helmets and stuff. So you're always trying to get their helmets off to rip their hairpiece off.
You're talking a toupee?
Yeah, they had to look good. We always knew who they were. There was a handful of them in the league, and you try and get their toupee.
Did you ever get a toupee?
No, hopefully I don't have. Oh, did I get one? No, but I seen one on the ice. I didn't get it. He was a good player, that guy too.
You know, I pretty much bug every guy now. In senior hockey, there's certain nights you play guilty. You go have a late night with the boys when it's a back-to-backer. I was curious on the way over if Mr. Sutter ever had in the NHL a night where he played guilty, if that was such a thing back then, where you went and had a few beers, too many, and
probably, especially after if you clinched a playoff spot, for sure. That I was right on the edge of that. The older group of guys that, their training that's what they did, was drink beer, and that's what they did. That was part of their deal. But I definitely seen guys like that, for sure. But I was also in the time where there wasn't I was lucky I played in a team where there wasn't a drug problem or anything like that. So, and I was the captain of the team also, so I had to make sure I was on top of all that stuff all the time.
Was there anyone through your career that kind of mentored you? Did you have a mentor, somebody who kind of showed you the ropes?
Yeah, I think for sure Tommy, because I was a young guy and he was a star or a top player in the league, and he was my roommate. And then for sure watching Tony Esposito, for sure. I mean, he was a Hall of Fame goalie and great goalie, and just to watch him practice and train, and even though he was a guy who, he loved life, he did everything off the ice that he could, but he was a great pro, and that's why he played a long time, and that's why he had the numbers he did.
Well, we're going to go into the final five. I have a segment to end off each episode. It's Crude Master Final Five, 5 questions. Short as long as we want to go. It's not a quick thing by any stretch of the imagination. But shout out to Heath and Tracy McDonald for they've been supporters of the podcast since I started it out. So if you could sit down with one person like this to pick their brain, dead or alive, doesn't have to be hockey, it can be just anything, who would you want to sit down with?
John Kennedy.
JFK. Really?
Yeah.
Why JFK?
I was a boy. When he became president, so so I was like 5 or 6 or 7 years old. Well, he died he was shot in '63, but he was just somebody that was wasn't a sports hockey player, but he was somebody that I admired and emulated, and
that's pretty crazy, isn't it? A small town farm kid out in the middle of Alberta knows about JFK.
I did lots after when I was a young boy and teenager, and I did a lot of stories and wrote about him and read a lot of books about him, and I've studied lots about him and his family, and just somebody that always stuck out.
What would be one question you'd ask him?
Well, what he was doing in that car in Dallas, without you think about back, and then too, he knew he was in, he was a target because of racial thing that was going on in the U.S. and the Cuban issue, and for him to ride in that car in that street. And I've went and walked along there and tried to figure out too, like what he was doing and where it was from. And as a young man like that, was pretty. I just thought he was a powerful guy. I liked everything about him.
I'd read, actually, now I'm thinking about it, that growing up you had three heroes: your parents, JFK, and John Wayne.
Yeah, John Wayne's big. If you go into Chris's room in our house, there's John Wayne's is an idol. He's got him all over his wall. John Wayne was just, we were kids growing up. He was the cowboy that always won. So,
if you could take any two line mates, who would you put on your line?
mean today's game, or well, if in today's game, I'd sure have Nathan McKinnon. For sure.
For sure?
Yeah, number one. For sure. And then I'd like to play with, if I was a player, I'd like to play with Kopitar. A great player.
So your line would be Sutter, Kopitar, McKinnon.
That'd be an awesome line. That's a work on that one.
You got to pick one of these three. You've coached against your brother, you've coached your brother, you've played against your brother, and you've GM'd for your brother. Which one was your favorite?
Well, I coached four of my brothers.
But if you had to pick coaching them, playing against them, or being their coach, you're the GM, what position did you like the best? Did you like going to war against them, or did you like coaching, or maybe the question should be, what was the most difficult?
It's a good question. Playing against them became easier just because of we were experienced guys, and coaching them was when I first started coaching my brothers, and that was in Chicago, and we traded for Brent, who was the captain of the New York Islanders, and he was a really good player. And we traded for Dwayne too, from the Islanders, and he was a role player. So that was, as a young coach, that was probably the hardest, because they're your brothers, and we just kind of got to the point where we had to separate the brother coach thing, and when we were at the rink, it was coach player, and we got away from the rink, we could be brothers, and that's probably how I formulated. Other than Brian, I coached all my brothers. Dwayne, Brent, Ronnie, Richie. And Brian and I coached against each other all the time. So but in the end, they were easy guys to coach, because my brothers were good pros. They just went about their business, and you could get into it about ice time or roles and stuff like that, like you do with everybody, every other. Doesn't matter, but everybody on the team clearly understood that there was no favorites. That's part of being on good teams.
Why number 27?
I was a call-up player. That's just what they hung in your stall.
And it stuck then.
Yeah, that was a high number then. Those numbers in the 20s, 25 and up, were not good numbers. I got called up, and that was the number that was hanging in the stall. So, and that's what they kept. My first training camp in Chicago, I think I was 42.
That's a Braden Holpe story. That's how he wore number 70. He told me.
Just hanging in his stall. It was his training camp number.
Training camp number.
Yeah.
And then people went out and bought it, and he thought, well, people spent good money on it. I can't change it now.
Yeah, it's funny in those high numbers. I like 27, and I don't know if I did then, but I like 27. Jeremy wore that in Chicago. Rick Vive wore it after me, and then Jeremy Roenick wore it. And I always thought those were good numbers. But those kids in L.A. would call him up, and we'd they'd wear their training camp numbers. That's why you seen all them 70s, and like when we won the cups, we had more guys in the 70s than like Toffoli, Pearson, King, Nolan. Them guys were all freaking. I used to get mixed up. I used to get the assistant coaches do the lineup cards. I said, these freaking 73, 74, 70. I can't remember.
What did the group of NHLers think when Gretzky came in and wore 99?
Yeah. It was looked on as they were guys that weren't going to last very long or something. Those high numbers, because you knew that they weren't given good numbers. I remember more about my jersey, not the number, but that's when they were the old wool jerseys. And so if they hadn't been worn very much, they discolored because they just keep them in trunks. And I remember one of the first games that I was in Chicago Stadium, and I wore that jersey, and it wasn't white, it was almost yellow, my jersey. Everybody else had a white jersey on, and I had almost like a off-colored white, one of my first games. And then that was before you had names on your jerseys. So they probably could have changed it to 27 to 87 or whatever they wanted overnight.
Your final one. If you could tell a young hockey player, young athlete, young person, any piece of advice right now, moving forward in their life, their profession, the game they're playing, what piece of advice would you give them?
I tell the same thing, and it still holds true over and over. If you coach kids or you coach pros, there's still three things that the player is responsible for: working hard, having fun, listen to the coach. Doesn't matter if you're 6 or you're 36. Work hard, have fun, listen to your coach. Do that, I think she's game on all the time. You're always happy with it. You're happy with yourself. Coach is happy with you. You're happy with the coach. Had fun. It's not a job.
Well, I appreciate you making some time for me this morning. It's been a lot of fun. I've certainly enjoyed this. And, well, thanks again.
Yep. Good seeing you, Sean. Have a great trip out to British Columbia.
Thank you. Hey, folks, thanks again for joining us today. If you just stumble on the show and like what you hear, please click subscribe. Remember, every Monday and Wednesday, a new guest will be sitting down to share their story. The Sean Newman Podcast is available for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you find your podcast fix. Until next time.